The unforgiving Arizona sun beat down on Zara Harrington as she collapsed onto the dusty trail, her strength finally giving out after 3 days without water. Death felt inevitable in the summer of 1878 until a shadow fell across her face and the rumble of a deep voice called out from above. Levi Stone dismounted from his stallion in one fluid motion, dust rising around his worn leather boots as he approached the fallen woman. Her once fine traveling dress was torn and filthy, her face burned red from the merciless sun. He knelt beside her, his broad-shouldered frame blocking the harsh sunlight. "Madam, can you hear me?" he asked, gently turning her over. Zara's eyelids fluttered open, revealing striking hazel eyes that somehow maintained their clarity despite her dire condition. "Water," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the desert wind. Levi quickly uncorked his canteen and carefully tipped a small amount into her parched mouth. "Easy now. Too much at once will make you sick." She tried to push herself up, desperate to get out of the dirt, but her arms trembled and gave way. I can't stand," she rasped in frustration. The cowboy's expression softened beneath the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat. "Then I'll kneel beside you until you can," he said simply, settling beside her as if he had all the time in the world. Zara studied him through half-lidded eyes, the sharp line of his jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble, the intensity of his steel blue eyes, the quiet confidence in the set of his shoulders. He couldn't be much older than her 22 years, perhaps 26 or 27. His clothes were dusty but well maintained, the mark of a man who took pride in what little he had. Where am I?" she managed to ask after several small sips of water. "About 20 miles outside of Silvercreek," Levi answered, scanning the horizon. "What in heaven's name is a lady like you doing out here alone?" The memory flooded back with painful clarity. Stagecoach, attacked, everyone else. She couldn't finish the sentence as tears welled in her eyes. "Bandits?" Levi asked, his jaw tightening. She nodded weakly. "How long ago?" 3 days, maybe 4. I lost count. I've been walking." Her voice trailed off as exhaustion threatened to claim her again. Levi's expression darkened. "You're safe now, Miss Harrington. Zara Harrington." "Miss Harrington, I'm Levi Stone." He tipped his hat in a gesture that seemed both courteous and oddly formal given their circumstances. "I need to get you to town, to a doctor." Zara tried once more to stand, but her legs refused to cooperate. "I'm sorry, I can't." "Don't apologize," Levi said firmly. "You survived 3 days in this desert without water. That's not something to apologize for." With gentle efficiency, he fashioned a makeshift shade using his coat and a few branches he gathered from a nearby mesquite tree. Then, he set about making a small fire, the practiced movements of his hands speaking to years of outdoor living. "The sun will be setting soon," he explained. "We'll rest here tonight, and I'll get you to town in the morning. You're in no condition to travel right now." Zara wanted to protest. She was acutely aware that she was alone in the wilderness with a man she'd just met, but she had no choice but to trust him. Besides, there was something in his eyes, something steady and honorable that made her believe he meant her no harm. As night fell, the desert temperature dropped dramatically. Levi wrapped his blanket around her shoulders and kept the fire burning, occasionally adding small branches to maintain the warmth. "Where are you from, Miss Harrington?" he asked, handing her a tin cup with a small portion of beans he'd warmed over the fire. "Boston," she replied, gratefully accepting the food. I was traveling to San Francisco to live with my aunt. My parents, she hesitated. They died in a fire 6 months ago. Levi nodded solemnly. I'm sorry for your loss. What about you, Mr. Stone? Are you from these parts? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Born in Texas, raised all over. My pa was a drover, so we followed the cattle trails. Been on my own since I was 16. He poked at the fire with a stick. Working as a ranch hand at the Triple R, about a day's ride from here. As they talked, Zara found herself growing more comfortable with this quiet, respectful man. His voice had a gentle rumble that reminded her of distant thunder, powerful but not threatening. By the time the moon rose high in the sky, painting the desert in silver light, she felt stronger. The water and food had revived her, though she knew she was still far from recovered. You should sleep, Levi said, noticing her eyelids growing heavy. I'll keep watch. What about you? I'm used to long nights. Besides, somebody needs to make sure the coyotes don't get too curious. As if on cue, a distant howl echoed across the landscape, causing Zara to tense. They won't come near the fire, Levi assured her. You're safe, Miss Harrington. She believed him. Despite everything, the attack, the days of desperate survival, the uncertainty of what awaited her in this moment, with this stranger who had appeared like some desert mirage, she felt safe. Zara awoke to the scent of coffee. Opening her eyes, she found Levi crouched by a small fire, pouring the dark liquid into 2 tin cups. Morning, he said, looking up with that same calm assurance she'd noticed the day before. How are you feeling? Zara took stock of her body. Every muscle ached, and her skin still felt hot and tight from sunburn, but the terrible weakness had subsided somewhat. Better, I think. Think you can eat something? He offered a strip of dried beef. It's not much, but it'll help give you strength for the ride, she accepted gratefully. After eating and drinking the surprisingly strong coffee, Zara attempted to stand. Her legs wobbled treacherously, but she managed to stay upright, clutching Levi's offered arm for support. That's good, he encouraged. Take your time. His proximity caused an unexpected flutter in her chest. Standing this close, she could smell the leather of his vest, the faint scent of soap beneath the dust and sweat of the trail. It was strangely comforting. I think I'm ready to try walking, she said, forcing herself to focus on the task at hand. With his support, she took a few tentative steps. Her legs were weak but functional, a vast improvement from yesterday. Levi watched her carefully, ready to catch her if she faltered. You're doing well for someone who was half dead yesterday, he said with approval. You must be stronger than you look. Necessity, Mr. Stone, she replied. It's amazing what one can do when there's no alternative. After she'd gained more confidence in her footing, Levi began to break camp. He moved with the efficiency of a man accustomed to a life on the move, each action purposeful and precise. Within minutes, the fire was doused, and his few belongings were packed away. My horse can carry us both to town, he explained, adjusting the saddle. It'll be a bit of a tight fit, but Ajax here is strong. The large bay stallion snorted as if in agreement, pawing at the ground impatiently. He seems spirited, Zara observed nervously. Levi patted the horse's neck. He is that, but he's loyal and sure-footed. He won't let us down. With careful hands, he helped her mount, then swung up behind her. The intimacy of the position wasn't lost on Zara, seated between Levi's strong arms, her back pressed against his chest. It was highly improper, and yet under these circumstances there was no alternative. "Ready?" he asked, his voice close to her ear. She nodded, unable to trust her voice. They set off at an easy pace, Levi careful not to jostle her unnecessarily. The desert landscape stretched endlessly around them, beautiful in its stark simplicity. Red rock formations rising from the earth like ancient sentinels, cacti standing proud against the relentless sun. The occasional flash of life as a lizard darted across their path. "How did you come to be out here?" Zara asked after they'd ridden in silence for a while. "It seems an unlikely coincidence." "I was heading back to the ranch after delivering a message to Silvercreek," he explained. "Took a shortcut across the flats. Good thing I did." "Indeed." She hesitated, then added softly, "Thank you, Mr. Stone. I'm not sure I expressed proper gratitude yesterday." His chest rumbled against her back as he spoke. "No need for thanks, Miss Harrington. Anyone would have done the same." "I'm not certain that's true," she countered, thinking of the stagecoach driver who'd abandoned the passengers at the first sign of trouble, running off into the desert only to be shot in the back. "There are many who wouldn't have stopped at all." Levi was quiet for a moment. "Then I'm glad it was me who found you." The simplicity of his statement touched something deep within her. Here was a man who viewed basic human decency not as exceptional, but as expected, a rare quality in a world that had recently shown Zara its cruelest face. As the sun climbed higher, Levi shared his canteen with her, insisting she drink regularly. "Dehydration's the biggest danger out here," he explained. "You can go without food for weeks, but water, that's another matter." "I learned that lesson rather dramatically," she replied with a wry smile. A chuckle rumbled through his chest. "I reckon you did at that." By midday, the distant outline of buildings shimmered on the horizon. Silvercreek. Relief washed over Zara at the sight. "Almost there," Levi said encouragingly. "Dr. Matthews is a good man. He'll take care of you." "And after that?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, revealing her uncertainty about what would come next. Her ticket to San Francisco had been in her trunk on the stagecoach, along with nearly all her money and possessions. Levi's arms tightened slightly around her, a subtle gesture of reassurance. "One step at a time, Miss Harrington. Let's get you well first." As they approached the town, Zara became acutely aware of her disheveled appearance. Her once fine traveling dress was torn and filthy, her hair a tangled mess. What would the townsfolk think of her arriving like this, pressed against a cowboy she barely knew? "Perhaps you could let me down at the edge of town," she suggested. "It might be better if I walk in on my own." "Worried about your reputation?" There was no judgment in his voice, only understanding. "Aren't you worried about yours?" she countered. Levi laughed, the sound surprisingly light. "Miss Harrington, I'm a ranch hand. I don't have much of a reputation to protect." Despite his assurance, he did slow Ajax to a stop at the town's outskirts. "If it makes you more comfortable, I understand. But I'm not letting you walk into town alone, not in your condition." His concern warmed her. "Perhaps a compromise. I could walk, but with your support." Levi nodded, dismounting in one fluid motion before reaching up to help her down. Her legs wobbled as they hit the ground, but his steady hands kept her upright. "Take your time," he said softly. "No need to rush." With one arm around her waist and her hand on his forearm, they made their slow way into Silvercreek. It was a typical frontier town, a wide main street lined with wooden buildings, a saloon with bat-wing doors, a general store, a small church at the far end. People stopped to stare at the strange pair making their way down the street, but Levi seemed oblivious to their scrutiny. "Dr. Matthews's office is just ahead," he said, nodding toward a white clapboard building with a neatly painted sign. As they approached, the door swung open, and a middle-aged man with spectacles and a kind face appeared. "Levi Stone, as I live and breathe. What trouble have you gotten yourself into now?" His eyes settled on Zara, and his expression quickly shifted to concern. "Bring her in. Quickly!" The doctor's office was cool and surprisingly orderly. He directed Levi to help Zara to an examination table before turning to wash his hands at a basin. "Stagecoach attack, Doc," Levi explained. "Found her in the desert yesterday. She'd been walking for days without water." Dr. Matthews's eyebrows shot up. "Days?" He turned to Zara with newfound respect. "You're lucky to be alive, young lady." "I know," she said simply. "If Mr. Stone hadn't found me when he did." The doctor nodded, understanding the unfinished thought. "Let's have a look at you then." He glanced meaningfully at Levi. "Perhaps you could wait outside, son." Levi hesitated, looking to Zara as if for permission to leave her side. "I'll be fine," she assured him, touched by his reluctance. "Thank you for everything." He tipped his hat. "I'll be right outside if you need anything." After he left, Dr. Matthews began his examination, clucking sympathetically at the sunburn on her face and arms. "Severe dehydration, some heat exhaustion, but no heat stroke from what I can tell. You're remarkably resilient, Miss Harrington. Zara Harrington. Well, Miss Harrington, you need rest, plenty of fluids, and some salve for these burns. I'd like you to stay here for observation, at least overnight." Zara's heart sank. I'm afraid I have very little money, Doctor. The bandits took everything." Dr. Matthews waved away her concern. "We'll sort that out later. For now, let's focus on getting you well." After applying a cooling salve to her burns and giving her a tonic to drink, he helped her to a small room at the back of his office. "Rest here. I'll check on you in a bit." Left alone, Zara sank into the narrow bed, overwhelmed by all that had happened. She was alive, against all odds, and it was thanks to a cowboy with steady blue eyes who had knelt beside her in the dust when she was too weak to stand. Outside in the waiting room, Levi paced restlessly. When Dr. Matthews finally emerged, he immediately stepped forward. "How is she?" "Remarkably well, considering what she's been through," the doctor replied. "She needs rest and care, but she should make a full recovery." Relief washed over Levi's face. "Good. That's good." Dr. Matthews studied him with knowing eyes. "She mentioned bandits took everything she had. Did she tell you where she was headed?" "San Francisco to her aunt's, but her ticket and money were stolen." The doctor sighed. "I see. Well, she can stay here tonight, but after that." He left the sentence hanging, Levi's jaw set with determination. "I'll speak with Mrs. Beckett at the boarding house. Maybe she needs help in the kitchen or something until Miss Harrington can contact her family." "That's kind of you, Levi. Always were a decent sort." The doctor patted his shoulder. "You can see her if you like, just for a few minutes. She needs her rest." Levi nodded gratefully and made his way to the back room. He knocked softly on the door frame before entering. Zara was sitting up in bed, looking fragile against the white sheets, but already much improved from when he'd found her. Some color had returned to her cheeks and her eyes were clearer. "Mr. Stone," she smiled, "the doctor says I have you to thank for my life." "You did the hard part," he replied, standing awkwardly by the door. Surviving 3 days out there that takes real grit. Please sit. She gestured to a chair beside the bed. If you have time, that is. Levi removed his hat and took the offered seat, turning the hat in his hands. I spoke with the doctor about your situation. I know you lost everything in the attack. Zara's smile faded. Yes, I'm afraid I find myself in quite a predicament. I thought maybe. He cleared his throat. Mrs. Beckett runs the boarding house in town. She's always looking for help. Maybe you could work there while you contact your aunt in San Francisco. Hope flickered in Zara's eyes. Do you think she would hire me? I don't have much experience with domestic work, I'm afraid. You're educated, though. I can tell by your speech. Maybe you could help with accounts or correspondence, he shrugged. Worth asking anyway. That's very thoughtful of you, Mr. Stone. I don't know how I'll ever repay your kindness. No need, he said quickly. Just seeing you recover is enough. He stood, suddenly self-conscious. I should let you rest. I'll come back tomorrow if that's all right. See how you're doing and maybe introduce you to Mrs. Beckett. I would like that very much, Zara replied softly. With a nod, Levi replaced his hat and left, his heart inexplicably lighter despite the complications of the situation. There was something about Zara Harrington that called to him a strength beneath her refined exterior, a resilience he admired. The next morning, Levi returned to find Zara sitting in the doctor's waiting room, looking remarkably improved. Dr. Matthews had provided her with a simple dress borrowed from his wife, and though it was a bit large, it was clean and presentable. Her dark hair had been brushed and plaited, and the worst of the sunburn had faded to a pink glow. Good morning, Miss Harrington, Levi greeted, hat in hand. You're looking much better today. I feel much better, thank you, she smiled warmly. Dr. Matthews says I can leave today, provided I continue to rest and drink plenty of water. That's good news. I spoke with Mrs. Beckett this morning. She's willing to meet with you if you're feeling up to it. Relief washed over Zara's face. Oh, that would be wonderful. I was just wondering what I should do next. Dr. Matthews entered from his office carrying a small package. Ah, Levi, good to see you. I've put together some salve for Miss Harrington's burns and a tonic to help restore her strength. He handed the package to Zara. Take a spoonful morning and night for the next week. Thank you, doctor. For everything. She hesitated. About your fee. Consider it paid, he said firmly, with a meaningful glance at Levi. Just take care of yourself, and perhaps when you're settled, you can help out at the clinic sometime. I could use an extra pair of hands occasionally. Zara blinked back grateful tears. I would be happy to. Outside, the morning was bright but not yet sweltering. Levi offered his arm, which Zara accepted with a smile. They made their way slowly down the main street, Levi shortening his stride to accommodate her still recovering strength. Silvercreek's not much, he said, gesturing to the modest buildings lining the street, but the people are decent for the most part. It seems lovely, Zara replied sincerely. After the terror of the attack and the desperation of her deserted ordeal, the simple wooden buildings and dusty streets appeared almost idyllic. The boarding house is just up ahead. Mrs. Beckett's a widow, runs the place on her own since her husband passed last year. She's strict but fair. The boarding house was a 2-story structure with a wide porch and clean white curtains in the windows. A sign reading, Beckett's Boarding Clean Rooms Fair Prices hung beside the door. Before they could knock, the door swung open to reveal a plump gray-haired woman with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense expression. Right on time, I see. I appreciate punctuality. She looked Zara up and down. So you're the young lady Levi here pulled from the desert. Come in, come in. The interior was spotlessly clean, with simple but well-maintained furniture. Mrs. Beckett led them to a small sitting room off the main hallway. Sit down, dear. You look ready to topple over. She gestured to a chair, then turned to Levi. You can wait in the kitchen if you like. Martha just made a fresh pot of coffee. Once Levi had left, Mrs. Beckett turned her full attention to Zara. Now then, Levi tells me you're looking for work until you can contact your family in San Francisco. Yes, madam. I'm afraid the stagecoach attack left me with nothing but the clothes on my back. Terrible business, that. Mrs. Beckett's expression softened slightly. Been too many attacks lately. Sheriff seems powerless to stop them. She straightened her apron. What skills do you have, Miss Harrington? I'm well educated. I can read and write, I'm proficient in arithmetic, and I've kept household accounts before. I also play the piano, though I don't suppose that's of much use here. Mrs. Beckett looked thoughtful. Actually, the church's pianist moved away last month. Reverend Wilson's been looking for someone to play for Sunday services. She tapped her fingers against her knee. As for here, I could use help with the books and correspondence, and sometimes with serving meals to the boarders, room and board plus $2 a week. That sound fair? Zara could hardly believe her luck. More than fair, Mrs. Beckett. I'm very grateful. Don't thank me yet, the older woman said wryly. You haven't seen the room. It's small, up in the attic. Gets hot in summer and cold in winter. But it's clean and it's private. That sounds perfect, Zara assured her. After sleeping on the desert floor, any room with a roof sounded like luxury. Good. You can start tomorrow. Today you rest, doctor's orders. Mrs. Beckett stood. Let's go tell Levi the good news, then I'll show you to your room. In the kitchen, Levi was chatting with a young woman who was kneading bread dough. He stood when the women entered. She'll do, Mrs. Beckett announced without preamble. Starting tomorrow. The relief on Levi's face made Zara's heart warm. That's real good news, Mrs. Beckett. Thank you. Don't thank me. I need the help. But there was a twinkle in her eye that belied her gruff tone. Martha, this is Miss Harrington. She'll be staying with us and helping with the accounts and such. The young woman at the table smiled shyly. Nice to meet you, Miss Harrington. Please, call me Zara. After showing Zara to her new room, small indeed, but clean and private as promised, Mrs. Beckett left her to rest. Levi had waited downstairs, and Zara found him on the porch, hat in hand. I can't thank you enough, Mr. Stone, she said, joining him. You've saved my life in more ways than one. It was nothing, he said, looking slightly embarrassed by her gratitude. I'm just glad it worked out. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant sound of a blacksmith's hammer and the occasional voice from the street. Will you be returning to your ranch now? Zara finally asked, surprised by how much the thought of his departure troubled her. Levi nodded. Need to report back, but I'll be in town again next Saturday for supplies. He hesitated, then added, Maybe I could call on you then. See how you're settling in? The warmth in his eyes made Zara's breath catch. I'd like that very much, Mr. Stone. Levi, he corrected gently. If we're to be friends, you might as well use my given name. Levi, she repeated, liking the way it felt on her tongue. And you must call me Zara. He smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression that transformed his weathered face. Zara it is, then. He replaced his hat. I should be going. The foreman doesn't take kindly to extended absences. Of course. She extended her hand. Until Saturday. Instead of shaking it, he took her hand gently in his, the calluses on his palm rough against her skin. Until Saturday, he agreed, then released her hand and descended the porch steps. Zara watched him mount Ajax and ride away, his straight back and broad shoulders silhouetted against the bright sky. Only when he disappeared from view did she realize she was still standing on the porch, her hand warm where he had touched it. The days passed quickly as Zara settled into life at Beckett's boarding house. Mrs. Beckett, for all her gruff exterior, proved to be fair and even kind in her own way. The work wasn't difficult, keeping the account books, writing letters to suppliers, helping serve meals to the boarders, and assisting with light cleaning. On her third day, she visited Reverend Wilson at the small church and offered her services as a pianist. The Reverend, a gentleman with a scholarly air, was delighted. The church's piano was out of tune and well worn, but it produced a sweet sound under Zara's skilled fingers. "You play beautifully, Miss Harrington," Reverend Wilson said after she demonstrated her abilities with a hymn. "We can offer a small stipend for Sunday services and Wednesday prayer meetings." "Thank you, Reverend. Music has always been a comfort to me." By Saturday, Zara had established a routine and begun to feel at home in Silvercreek. Several of the boarders had been solicitous and kind, especially once they heard about her ordeal. The stagecoach attack had been the talk of the town. Apparently it was the third such incident in recent months. Still, she found herself watching the window more frequently as the day wore on, anticipating Levi's visit. She had just finished helping Martha clear the lunch dishes when Mrs. Beckett appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Levi Stone's here to see you," she announced, her expression neutral but her eyes knowing. "He's waiting on the porch." "Thank you, Mrs. Beckett." Zara untied her apron, suddenly self-conscious. "Is it all right if I—" "Go on," the older woman said with a wave. "You've worked hard this week. Take some time for yourself." Levi stood as Zara stepped onto the porch, removing his hat in one smooth motion. He looked different, freshly shaved, his shirt clean and pressed, his boots polished. The transformation was subtle but noticeable. "Miss Harrington," he greeted, a smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "You're looking well." "As are you, Mr. Stone." She gestured to the porch swing. "Would you like to sit?" They settled side by side, the swing creaking gently beneath them. For a moment, neither spoke, content to enjoy the relative cool of the shaded porch. "How are you finding Silvercreek?" Levi finally asked. "Is Mrs. Beckett treating you all right?" "Very well, actually. She's been most kind in her own way." Zara smiled. "And I've been hired to play piano for the church services." "Is that so? I'll have to make sure I'm in town for Sunday service then." The thought of him attending church specifically to hear her play sent a pleasant warmth through Zara. "How are things at the ranch?" "Same as always. Cattle, dust, and more cattle." His shoulder brushed against hers as the swing moved. "Though the foreman did raise his eyebrows when I asked for today off. 2 trips to town in 1 week is unusual for me." "I hope it hasn't caused trouble for you," Zara said, concerned. Levi shook his head. "No trouble. I just told him I had important business in town." "And do you have important business, I mean?" His eyes met hers, serious and intent. "I'd say checking on the woman I found half dead in the desert qualifies, wouldn't you?" Before she could respond, the door opened and Martha appeared with a tray. Mrs. Beckett thought you might like some lemonade, she said with a shy smile. That's very thoughtful, thank you, Zara replied, accepting the tray. After Martha disappeared back inside, Levi chuckled. I think you've made quite an impression on the Beckett household. They've been very kind, Zara said, pouring lemonade into 2 glasses. Everyone has. People here look out for each other, Levi explained, accepting the offered glass. It's the only way to survive out here. They talked easily, the initial awkwardness fading as they shared stories of their past week. Levi described life on the ranch, the pre-dawn starts, the long days on horseback, the simple camaraderie of the bunkhouse. Zara told him about the Borders, a traveling salesman with endless stories, a young couple waiting for their homestead to be built, an elderly widow who knitted constantly. As the afternoon shadows lengthened, Levi reluctantly stood. I should be getting back. It's a long ride to the ranch. Disappointment flickered through Zara, but she nodded understanding. Of course. I'll be in town tomorrow for the church service, he said, if that's all right with you. I like that very much, she replied honestly. He hesitated, then asked, would you consider taking a walk with me after, weather permitting? I would be delighted, Mr. Stone. Levi, he reminded her gently. Levi, she corrected with a smile. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Zara took special care with her appearance, pinning her hair in a simple but flattering style and wearing her best dress, one of 2 that Mrs. Beckett had helped her acquire from the general store, promising to deduct the cost from her wages over time. The church service was well attended, the small building nearly full as Reverend Wilson delivered a sermon on perseverance in times of hardship. Zara played the hymns with feeling, her eyes occasionally drifting to where Levi sat in the back pew. He looked somewhat uncomfortable in his Sunday best, but his attention never wavered from the service or from her. Afterward, as the congregation spilled out into the churchyard, several people approached to compliment her playing. Zara accepted their kind words graciously, all the while aware of Levi waiting patiently to one side, hat in hand. When the well-wishers finally dispersed, he approached. You play beautifully, he said simply. Never heard Amazing Grace sound quite so, well, graceful. Thank you, she replied, touched by his sincerity. Are you still interested in that walk? Very much so. They strolled through the town, Levi pointing out buildings of interest, the marshal's office, the telegraph office that doubled as a post office, the school that met 3 days a week when the teacher wasn't needed elsewhere. It's smaller than I imagined, Zara admitted as they reached the edge of town. But there's something charming about knowing everyone's name and business. Levi laughed. That part can be less charming when it's your business everyone knows. A comfortable silence fell between them as they followed a small path that led to a creek just beyond the town limits. The water gurgled pleasantly over stones, and cottonwood trees provided welcome shade from the afternoon sun. This is lovely, Zara said, sitting on a fallen log. A little oasis. Levi settled beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. I discovered it my first time in Silvercreek. Sometimes a man needs a bit of quiet. I can understand that. She trailed her fingers in the cool water. It's strange, but after everything that happened, I find myself grateful to be here. Is that odd? Not odd at all, Levi said thoughtfully. Life has a way of taking unexpected turns. Sometimes they lead somewhere better than where you were headed. Is that what happened to you? An unexpected turn? He considered the question seriously. In a way. I never planned to stay in one place this long. Always figured I'd keep moving like my pa did. What changed? Found I liked having somewhere to come back to. People who know my name. His eyes met hers. And now I'm even more glad I stayed. The simple honesty of his words touched her deeply. This man, with his quiet strength and uncomplicated goodness, was unlike anyone she had ever known in Boston. I wrote to my aunt yesterday, she said, changing the subject as emotions threatened to overwhelm her. Reverend Wilson helped me send a telegram as well. Hopefully I'll hear back soon. That's good, Levi nodded, though something flickered in his eyes' concern. Perhaps, or something else she couldn't quite name. I'm sure she's worried about you. To be honest, I barely know her. She's my mother's older sister. They weren't close, Zara sighed. But she's the only family I have left. Levi was quiet for a moment, then asked gently, "What will you do when you hear from her?" It was a question Zara had been asking herself with increasing frequency. The logical answer was to continue to San Francisco as planned. And yet, I don't know, she admitted. The plan was always to go to San Francisco, but now. Now? Levi prompted when she didn't continue. Now I'm not sure that's what I want anymore. She looked up at him, finding his gaze intense and focused. Is that foolish? To reconsider my entire future based on just a week in a place I never meant to visit? Not foolish, he said softly. Brave, maybe. The word settled around her like a comfortable blanket. Brave, not lost or confused or directionless. Brave. Their conversation turned to lighter topics as the afternoon wore on. Favorite books. He had a surprising fondness for Dickens. Childhood memories, hers of formal piano recitals, his of sleeping under the stars during cattle drives. Hopes for the future. When the sun began to dip low in the sky, they reluctantly made their way back to town. At the boarding house steps, Levi paused. I have to head back to the ranch tonight. Won't be able to get to town again for 2 weeks. We're moving cattle to the north pasture. Disappointment pierced Zara more sharply than she expected. 2 weeks suddenly seemed an eternity. I understand, she said, striving to keep her voice light. The ranch must keep you busy. It does, but he hesitated, seeming to wrestle with something. Would it be all right if I wrote to you? Joy blossomed in her chest. I would like that very much. I'm not much of a letter writer, he warned with a self-deprecating smile. Never had much schooling. I don't mind, she assured him. I'd just like to hear from you. The look he gave her then was so warm, so full of something unspoken that Zara felt her breath catch. For a moment she thought he might take her hand, or perhaps even, but he merely tipped his hat. Until next time then, Zara. Until next time, Levi. She watched him walk away, his tall figure straight and steady, and realized with startling clarity that she was falling in love with the cowboy who had knelt beside her in the desert. True to his word, Levi's first letter arrived 3 days later, delivered by a ranch hand who was passing through town. The envelope was slightly creased, the handwriting careful and deliberate, as if each letter had been formed with great concentration. Zara took the letter to her small attic room, sitting on the bed as she carefully opened the envelope. Dear Miss Harrington, Zara, I hope this letter finds you well. The cattle drive to the north pasture is going as planned. The weather has been favorable, though the nights are getting cooler. Makes me think fall isn't far off. I'm not much for putting thoughts on paper, as I warned you. My schooling was limited to what my ma could teach me between moves, and later what I could pick up on my own. But I wanted to keep my promise to write. I find myself thinking of you often, especially in the quiet moments before sleep. I wonder how you're settling in at Mrs. Beckett's, if you're continuing to regain your strength, if the townsfolk are treating you well. There's a wildflower that grows on the North Ridge that reminds me of you, delicate-looking but strong enough to withstand the harshest conditions. I've pressed one between the pages of my Bible. Don't tell Reverend Wilson I'm using it for such purposes, and enclosed it here. I look forward to seeing you when I return to town, if you're amenable to my company again. Respectfully yours, Levi Stone. Inside the letter was a small pressed purple flower, its color still vibrant despite being flattened. Zara held it gently, deeply touched by the gesture. It was such a small thing, and yet it spoke volumes about the man who had sent it, his thoughtfulness, his attention to detail, his unexpected poetic streak. She immediately sat down to compose a reply, her pen flowing across the paper with ease. Dear Levi, your letter was a welcome surprise, as was the beautiful flower. I've placed it on my small bedside table where I can see it each morning when I wake. Thank you for thinking of me. Life at Mrs. Beckett's continues to be pleasant. I've taken on additional responsibilities managing the household accounts, which keeps me busy during the day. In the evenings, I practice on the church piano. Reverend Wilson kindly gave me a key so I can play whenever I wish. The instrument is somewhat out of tune, but the acoustics in the empty church are quite lovely. I received a reply from my aunt in San Francisco. She was relieved to hear I survived the stagecoach attack and has offered to send money for a train ticket. I have not yet responded. The truth is, I find myself increasingly reluctant to leave Silvercreek. Is that strange, given how brief my time here has been? The wildflowers you mentioned sound beautiful. I would very much like to see them someday, perhaps when you return. And yes, I am most definitely amenable to your company again. Until then, I remain, yours sincerely, Zara. After sealing the letter, she entrusted it to Mrs. Beckett, who promised to give it to the next ranch hand who came through town. The days fell into a comfortable pattern as Zara waited for Levi's return. Mornings were spent helping with breakfast for the boarders, then tending to the account books. Afternoons often found her at the church, practicing for the Sunday service, or helping Reverend Wilson organize the small church library. Evenings were for quiet reading or conversation with the other boarders. A week after sending her letter, a response came from Levi, carried by the same ranch hand. This letter was longer than the first, describing the beauty of the North Pasture, a humorous incident involving a stubborn calf, and his thoughts on a book the ranch cook had lent him. I find myself counting the days until I can return to town, he wrote near the end. Not just for supplies or a proper bath, though both are sorely needed. I miss our conversations, your smile, the way you listen as if every word matters. Is it too forward to say these things? If so, I apologize. Life out here doesn't leave much room for social niceties. Zara pressed the letter to her heart, a smile spreading across her face. No, it wasn't too forward, at least not to her. In her reply, she told him so, allowing herself to be more open about her own feelings than propriety might dictate. By the time Levi was due to return to Silvercreek, they had exchanged 4 letters. Each one revealed more of their thoughts, hopes, and dreams, creating a bond that transcended their brief physical acquaintance. On the Saturday Levi was expected, Zara found herself changing her dress 3 times before settling on a blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. She arranged her hair with special care, pinning it up but allowing a few tendrils to frame her face. "My, don't you look pretty today?" Mrs. Beckett commented as Zara came downstairs. "Special occasion?" "No, nothing special," Zara replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. Mrs. Beckett's knowing smile suggested she wasn't fooled. "Well, if a certain cowboy happens to call today, I've made fresh apple pie. Might be nice to share a slice on the porch." "Thank you, Mrs. Beckett." The morning passed with agonizing slowness. Zara tried to focus on her usual tasks, but her attention continually drifted to the window, watching for a familiar figure on horseback. It was early afternoon when she heard the distinctive clop of horse hooves on the street outside. Looking up from the ledger she'd been attempting to balance, she saw Levi dismounting in front of the boarding house. Her heart leaped into her throat. She forced herself to remain seated, to finish the column of figures before her, though her hand trembled slightly. A moment later, a knock sounded at the front door, followed by Martha's voice greeting Levi. Taking a deep breath to compose herself, Zara closed the ledger and stood. She smoothed her dress, tucked a stray hair back into place, and stepped into the hallway. Levi stood just inside the door, hat in hand, looking somewhat travel-worn but clean and presentable. His eyes found hers immediately, lighting up with a warmth that made her breath catch. "Miss Harrington," he greeted formally, aware of Martha's presence. "Mr. Stone," she replied with equal formality, though a smile tugged at her lips. "How nice to see you again. I was hoping I might have a word with you, if you're not too busy." "Not at all. Perhaps we could sit on the porch. Mrs. Beckett mentioned something about apple pie." Martha took the hint and disappeared toward the kitchen, leaving them momentarily alone in the hallway. "You look beautiful," Levi said softly, his eyes never leaving her face. "Thank you," Zara replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. "You look, well." A small chuckle escaped him. "Diplomatic way of saying I look like I've been riding for 6 hours straight." "I wouldn't say that," she protested with a smile, though perhaps a bit dusty around the edges. Their easy banter continued as they settled on the porch swing, plates of Mrs. Beckett's apple pie balanced on their laps. The afternoon was pleasant, a slight breeze taking the edge off the late summer heat. "Your letters were the highlight of these past 2 weeks, Levi said after they'd exchanged pleasantries about the weather and town gossip. "Never knew I had so much to say until I started writing to you." "I felt the same," Zara admitted. "I looked forward to each one." A comfortable silence fell between them as they enjoyed the pie. Zara stole glances at Levi's profile, the strong line of his jaw, now cleanly shaved, the slight furrow between his brows as he concentrated on balancing his plate, the way the sunlight brought out gold highlights in his brown hair. "Have you replied to your aunt yet?" Levi asked suddenly, setting his empty plate aside. "About the train ticket?" Zara sighed, placing her own plate on the small table beside the swing. "No, not yet. I should, I know, but I keep putting it off." "Because you're still unsure?" "Yes." She met his gaze directly. "Part of me feels I should go to San Francisco as planned. It would be the sensible thing to do. But another part, he prompted gently when she hesitated. Another part feels like I've found something here I never expected. Something I don't want to leave behind." The admission hung in the air between them, its implications clear. Levi's expression grew serious. Zara, I'm not a wealthy man. I can't offer you the kind of life you probably had in Boston or would have in San Francisco. But if you're saying what I think you're saying— I don't care about wealth, she interrupted softly. I care about you. The words slipped out before she could stop them, but she found she didn't regret their honesty. These past weeks of letters had deepened her feelings beyond what she would have thought possible in such a short time. Levi's eyes widened slightly, then softened with an emotion that made her heart race. I care about you too, Zara, more than I can rightly say. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, and took her hand in his. The touch was simple but profound, his calloused palm warm against her skin. I know it's fast, he continued, his voice low and earnest. We've barely known each other a month, but I've never felt this way about anyone before. Neither have I, Zara admitted. It's overwhelming sometimes how strongly I feel. His thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. I've been thinking a lot these past 2 weeks, about the future, about what I want. And what do you want, Levi? His eyes met hers, steady and sure. You, us. A life together, if you'll have me. The directness of his statement took her breath away. There was no flowery language, no grand declarations, just simple, honest truth. Are you proposing? She asked, hardly daring to believe it. A slight smile curved his lips. Not exactly. Not yet. I'm asking if you might consider staying in Silvercreek, if you might give us time to see where this leads. He squeezed her hand gently. I don't want to rush you, Zara. I know you have decisions to make about your future. Relief and a touch of disappointment mingled in her chest. It was sensible, of course, to take time, to be sure. But part of her had been ready to say yes to a question he hadn't quite asked. I want to stay, she said softly. At least for now. I want to see where this leads to. The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise in the desert, warm, bright, and full of promise. That makes me happier than I can say. For a long moment they simply gazed at each other, hands joined, hearts aligned in hope and possibility. Then, slowly, Levi leaned forward. Zara's breath caught as she realized his intention. She closed her eyes as his lips met hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. It was brief, but perfect a promise, a beginning. When they parted, Levi's eyes were bright with emotion. I should probably have asked permission for that, he said, though he didn't look particularly regretful. I would have given it, Zara replied with a smile. The sound of the front door opening caused them to move slightly apart, though their hands remained clasped between them. Mrs. Beckett appeared, her expression neutral but her eyes twinkling knowingly. More pie, she offered. No thank you, madam, Levi replied. It was delicious, though. Best in the territory, if I do say so myself. She collected their empty plates. Beautiful afternoon for a walk, if you're interested. Town's quiet on Saturdays. The suggestion was clear, and Zara felt a rush of gratitude for the older woman's tacit approval. A walk sounds lovely, she agreed, rising from the swing. Let me just get my shawl. As they strolled through Silvercreek, their conversation flowed easily, touching on Levi's work at the ranch, the latest town gossip, and their hopes for the future. Occasionally their hands would brush, sending pleasant tingles up Zara's arm. Once, when they paused to let a wagon pass, Levi boldly took her hand in his, and she didn't pull away. They ended up at the creek again, sitting side by side on the same fallen log as before. The late afternoon sun filtered through the cottonwood leaves, creating dappled patterns on the ground at their feet. "I've been thinking," Levi said after a comfortable silence. "I've been saving money. Not a fortune, but enough to put a down payment on a small piece of land. The Triple R has been good to me, but I've always wanted something of my own." "Your own ranch?" Zara asked, intrigued by this glimpse into his ambitions. "Something smaller to start, maybe a few dozen head of cattle, some horses." He looked at her, his expression open and vulnerable. "A place to build a life." The implication was clear, and Zara's heart quickened. "That sounds wonderful, Levi." "It would be hard work, especially at first," he warned. "Nothing like the life you knew in Boston." "My life in Boston is gone," she said softly, "and I'm finding I don't miss it as much as I thought I would." She smiled at him. "Besides, I've discovered I'm stronger than I knew. 3 days in the desert taught me that." Levi's expression grew serious. "You are the strongest woman I've ever met, Zara Harrington. When I found you that day, too weak to stand but still fighting to live, I knew then you were something special." He reached up to touch her cheek, his fingers gentle against her skin. "I meant what I said that day. I'll kneel beside you until you can stand. And once you're standing, I'll walk beside you for as long as you'll let me." Tears pricked at Zara's eyes at the sincerity in his voice. "That might be a very long time, Levi Stone." "I'm counting on it," he replied, and kissed her again, more confidently this time. As summer faded into fall, Zara and Levi's courtship continued, conducted partly through letters when his ranch duties kept him away, and partly through stolen afternoons and evenings when he could come to town. Each meeting deepened their connection, each letter revealed more of their hearts. Zara finally wrote to her aunt, explaining her decision to stay in Silvercreek. The response was surprisingly supportive, along with an offer to send some of Zara's belongings that had been stored in Boston. When the trunks arrived by train a month later, Zara felt as if the final threads connecting her to her old life had been tied off neatly, allowing her to fully embrace her new one. Life in Silvercreek suited her far better than she could have imagined. Her role at the boarding house expanded as Mrs. Beckett came to trust her judgment and abilities. Playing piano for the church brought her a sense of community and purpose, and her growing relationship with Levi gave her a joy she had never experienced before. By Thanksgiving, their intentions toward each other were well known in town. Mrs. Beckett had taken to referring to Levi as "your young man" when speaking to Zara, and Reverend Wilson had begun including not-so-subtle references to the sanctity of marriage in his sermons whenever Levi was in attendance. The first snow fell in early December, transforming Silvercreek into a winter wonderland. Levi rode into town despite the weather, arriving at the boarding house with cheeks reddened from cold, but eyes warm with purpose. "I was worried you wouldn't make it," Zara said as she welcomed him inside. "The roads must be terrible." "Wild horses couldn't have kept me away," he replied, stamping snow from his boots. "I have news." They settled in the parlor, the other boarders tactfully finding reasons to be elsewhere. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the room. "I've done it," Levi announced without preamble. "I've put a down payment on the Matthews place." "The homestead outside town? The one with the creek running through it?" Zara's eyes widened. "That's the one. Old man Matthews is moving to Colorado to live with his daughter. 15 acres, a small cabin that needs work but is solid, a good well, and enough grazing land for 30 head of cattle." His eyes shone with excitement. It's a start, Zara, a place of our own. Our own? She repeated, her heart racing at the implication. Levi's expression grew serious. He slid from the sofa to one knee before her, taking her hands in his. Zara Harrington, I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. You've brought light and joy into my life that I never knew was missing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small ring, a simple gold band with a modest diamond. Will you marry me? Will you build a life with me on that little piece of land? Tears of joy sprang to Zara's eyes. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes, Levi Stone, I will marry you. His face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. It was my mother's, he explained, the only thing of value she left me. She would have loved you. It's beautiful, Zara said, admiring how the diamond caught the firelight. When? When shall we marry? As soon as you'd like, Levi replied, rising to sit beside her again. Though the cabin needs work before it's fit for a bride, the roof leaks in 3 places and the front porch is rotting in spots. I don't mind waiting until spring, Zara assured him, though her heart longed for immediacy. It will give us time to prepare properly. Levi kissed her, a lingering, sweet promise of the future they would share. I'll come every weekend to work on the cabin. By April, it'll be ready for you. True to his word, Levi rode to town every weekend that winter, spending Saturdays working on the cabin and Sundays with Zara. She often accompanied him to the homestead, helping where she could and planning where their furniture would go, what curtains would hang at the windows, how they would make the simple structure into a home. By March, the cabin was transformed. Levi had repaired the roof and porch, added a new cook stove, built simple but sturdy furniture, and even planted a small garden plot for Zara to tend come spring. Mrs. Beckett contributed a handmade quilt for their bed, while Reverend Wilson gifted them a family Bible. Other townsfolk, who had come to know and respect Zara during her months in Silvercreek, provided various household items to help the young couple start their life together. Their wedding day dawned clear and bright in early April, the desert beginning to bloom with spring flowers. The ceremony was held in the small church where Zara had played piano every Sunday since her arrival. Nearly the entire town attended, along with Levi's fellow ranch hands from the Triple R. Zara wore a simple white dress that Martha had helped her make, with tiny wildflowers woven into her dark hair. Levi, standing tall at the altar in a new suit, looked at her with such love and pride as she walked down the aisle that she felt her heart might burst with happiness. Dearly beloved, Reverend Wilson began, his voice carrying clearly through the packed church. We are gathered here today to witness the union of this man and this woman in holy matrimony. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, the traditional vows spoken with deep sincerity by both bride and groom. When Reverend Wilson pronounced them husband and wife, Levi's kiss was both tender and passionate, drawing cheers from the assembled guests. The celebration afterward, held in the town square under budding trees strung with lanterns, continued well into the evening. There was music, dancing, and enough food to feed twice their number. Zara and Levi moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and well wishes, their hands rarely separating. As the sun began to set, Levi leaned close to his new wife's ear. Ready to go home? Home. The word filled Zara with indescribable joy. Yes, she replied, squeezing his hand. I'm ready. They said their goodbyes and thank yous, then climbed into the wagon Levi had borrowed for the occasion. Mrs. Beckett pressed a basket of food into Zara's hands, while several of the ranch hands attached old boots and tin cans to the back of the wagon, laughing uproariously at their own joke. The short journey to their homestead was filled with anticipation and shy glances. When they arrived, Levi surprised Zara by lifting her into his arms to carry her across the threshold, a gesture that made her laugh with delight. Inside, the cabin was warm and welcoming. Levi had come earlier that morning to light the stove and place vases of wildflowers on every available surface. Candles cast a soft glow over the simple furnishings, transforming the rustic space into something magical. "It's perfect," Zara breathed, taking it all in. "Absolutely perfect." "Welcome home, Mrs. Stone," Levi said, his voice husky with emotion. That night, as they lay entwined in their new bed beneath Mrs. Beckett's quilt, Levi traced the contours of Zara's face with gentle fingers. "Do you ever think about that day, when we first met?" "Often," she admitted. "How could I not? It was the day my life changed forever." "Mine too." He kissed her softly. "I remember looking down at you, thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, even half dead from the desert." Zara laughed. "You're exaggerating. I must have looked terrible." "Beautiful," he insisted, "and so brave. When you said you couldn't stand, and I told you that you'd kneel beside me until I could," she finished for him, the memory as clear as if it had happened yesterday. "I knew then that you were someone special, Levi Stone." "I intend to keep that promise," he said seriously. "For all our days together, whatever comes, we face it side by side." "Side by side," Zara agreed, sealing the vow with a kiss. The years that followed were everything they had hoped for, and more. The small homestead flourished under their care, gradually expanding as Levi added more cattle and horses. Zara continued to play piano for the church when time allowed, and also taught music to the children of Silvercreek, finding joy in passing on her knowledge. Their first child, a son they named James, arrived just over a year after their wedding. He had his father's steady temperament and his mother's quick mind, and was the joy of their lives. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Elizabeth, with dark hair like Zara's and Levi's striking blue eyes. Life on the frontier was never easy. There were droughts that threatened their cattle, harsh winters that tested their endurance, and the everyday challenges of building a life from the unforgiving land. But through it all, Levi and Zara faced each day together, their love a constant source of strength and comfort. Often, when the children were asleep and the day's work was done, they would sit on their porch, watching the desert sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. Sometimes they spoke of the future, of their hopes for their children, of the plans they had for their growing ranch. Other times they sat in comfortable silence, hands entwined, content in each other's presence. And sometimes, on special nights, Levi would turn to Zara with a twinkle in his eye and say, "Remember when you were too weak to stand, and I said I'd kneel beside you until you could?" "I remember," she would always reply, leaning into his embrace, "and you've kept that promise every day since." "And I always will," he would say, kissing her beneath the vast desert sky. "For all our days together, side by side." In the autumn of their 10th year on the homestead, with the children growing tall and strong and the ranch prospering beyond their early dreams, Zara found herself once again at the creek where they had first walked together. Levi joined her there, wrapping his arms around her from behind as they watched the water flow, constant and unchanging despite the passing years. Any regrets? He asked softly, resting his chin on her shoulder. About staying in Silvercreek? About choosing this life? Zara turned in his arms to face him, noting the silver beginning to thread through his hair at the temples, the laugh lines deepening around his eyes, signs of a life well lived, of joy and hardship weathered together. Not one, she said with absolute certainty. This life, our life, is more than I ever dreamed possible. Even with the drought last summer and the roof leaking again, and James bringing home every stray critter he finds, Levi's eyes twinkled with humor. Especially with all of that, Zara laughed. It's real, Levi. It's ours, and I wouldn't trade it for all the comfort and luxury in Boston or San Francisco. His expression grew serious, tender. I love you, Zara Stone. More now than the day I married you, if that's possible. I love you too, she replied, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. My cowboy who knelt beside me when I couldn't stand. The man who taught me what it means to be truly strong. As they walked hand in hand back toward their home, where their children waited and the future stretched before them bright with promise, Zara reflected on the strange and wonderful path that had led her here. A tragic stagecoach attack, 3 desperate days in the desert, and then salvation in the form of a man who had seen value in her when she was at her weakest. Life had a way of taking unexpected turns, as Levi had once said. Sometimes they led somewhere better than where you were headed. Sometimes they led exactly where you were meant to be all along.